So I was perusing the Internet Archive's magazine collection the other day, as one does, and I was searching for magazines and articles on the deck PDP-11, as one does, I suppose. And while I was just like generally perusing their collection, I came across this magazine called Future Sex. And with a title like that, as somebody interested in like retro technology, how could I not be like pretty intrigued from the get-go? Future Sex was a magazine that was created in the early 1990s in San Francisco. It was poised to be this kind of subversive, innovative magazine featuring the intersection of technology and sex. Yet, it was often panned by critics for playing it a little bit safe and kind of ditching their subject matter. Computers were very unsexy in the 1990s, I think. I don't think there was really conversation going on about how technology would influence sex and human relations back then, but I have to admit I'm not the most informed on the subject matter. When I think of the intersection of technology and sex in the 90s, all I can really think of is video games, honestly. Specifically, stuff like Night Trap and Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, those awkward FMV titles that were trying to make interactive sexual experiences, but really kind of failing. Specifically, I think of a game that I've wanted to feature on my channel for a very long time and just have not been able to for very obvious reasons. It's this really dumb game called A Night with Troy, which would have been released in the middle of this magazine's run. It's a text adventure game where you have sex with Deanna Troi from Star Trek. While interacting with this game, it cannot understand the phrase remove pants, but typing out lie Troy causes it to regurgitate several paragraphs of graphic sex that could only been written by a teenage boy who decided he'd rather hang around with his 386 than go to prom. This is all to say that I think Future Sex Magazine existed a little bit too early for a time that really just never came. I don't think that very many people were asking the question about how technology was going to influence sexuality to a large enough degree. If you watch shows like The Computer Chronicles, you'll see Stuart Chaffee interview IBM executives about how like the IBM PC Junior is going to revolutionize the office world. And if you read Amiga World, you'll read countless articles by nerds arguing about the impending television revolution. But where are the publications about the intersection between technology and sex, right? The premise of this magazine really instantly breaks down while I flip through the advertisements. Sure, they're kind of sexy advertisements, but they're not particularly themed around technology or futuristic expectations of sex. The inside cover is an ad for generic sex devices and services, and interestingly enough, it has a phone line you can call for information on sex. It's not a sex hotline, but apparently a recorded message that tells you how to have sex. I guess that's a pretty innovative idea. I didn't really grow up in the 90s themselves, but I know what it's like to grow up in the aughts without the internet really being a thing, and it was really difficult to find information on sex generally speaking. I would love to know what information this number actually gave. I called it, of course, but it's not in service. I didn't even expect it to still be in service. The rest of the ads aren't really related to future sex either, and it made me question if I had understood the premise of this magazine. There are what I assume would be pretty standard advertisements for videos, toys, and an advertisement that actually I think would feel more at home in an Alex Jones video than what I would expect a magazine about the future of sex to have. It's selling supplements and vitamins and that kind of stuff. And I really have to question, like, who is purchasing these? I definitely would not trust whatever Fast Blast Power Maker 2 is to begin with, and even less if I purchased it from a random sex magazine I got at the gas station. But at the same time, I guess that there is a huge market for those rhino pills, so what do I know? While the concept of Future Sex Magazine is intriguing, I think that these advertisements really kind of prove that previous assessment that I made that there just wasn't enough content or demand to sustain a magazine, especially in the 1990s. Like, I think you could pull this off today. I think you could make a like shitty low budget future sex website that nobody visited. But in the 90s, I mean, it costs money to make a publication and you have to get some of that money back. But like, I don't think it was there. And as a spoiler warning, this magazine only ran for like 7 issues, so I guess that assessment was correct. This magazine was kind of doomed from the start because I think it tries to merge two demographics that are very much disinterested in each other. I think the people coming at this from a technological perspective, the people who are interested in the actual like technology and assessments of where that technology will take us, are going to be pretty disinterested in the actual pornography. And I think the people who are looking for pornography are going to be pretty apathetic about technology. There actually is an article, though, that I feel like brings the magazine back to its stated thesis. It's called Pleasure by the Numbers, and it's the article that really made me want to make this video, actually. If we're talking about the 90s expectations of how technology will influence sex a few short decades hence, this is the article to describe it, and it's surprisingly prescient in that regard. But at the same time, it's an unrealized dream that's been shared since the invention of computer graphics. This article is all about VR sex and the ways it's going to shape human interaction. It perfectly predicts some of the spicier sides of services like VR chat down to how many Fox girls you can find in that corner of the internet, but it oversteps a bit by pretty definitively stating that pretty soon VR sex is going to be kind of the standard method of sexual contact between people, and frankly, that's never going to happen. According to this author, in just a few short years, I'd assume around the year 2000 or so, we will be fully integrating ourselves into a seamless virtual reality experience via full body tactile suits. And it's a vision that we've shared all the way up until today. There's been kind of huge cultural expectations around that seamless VR experience. We expect it all the time to be just around the corner. The earliest example of this that I can immediately think of is the movie Brainstorm, where they predict that with the invention of the microprocessor, a bridge between computers and the brain will finally be built, and we'll be able to share these intimate experiences and even a view of heaven itself over telephone lines and magnetic tape.
Oh my
And we see that all the time in modern popular culture. In 2016, it was a big concept with Ready Player One, predicting that in like a decade or so, we'd all be living in virtual reality using cheap consumer laptops picked from the trash. And I actually recently finished watching the show Upload, where they similarly predict that in just a few years, just like tomorrow, the interface between brain and computer will be seamless. Isn't it kind of interesting that 30 years after this magazine was published, we're still kind of yearning for and expecting this particular technological revolution? And those revolutions have thus far eluded us as a society. But at the same time, I think that this magazine has an unrealistic expectation of pornography's role in this particular advancement. This article makes some pretty bold claims about how pornography and the desire for sex will carry forward technology, though. At the time of this magazine's publication, VHS tape was an established medium for the distribution of home video, and whether true or not, the supposition that pornography was the dominant factor behind the development and the domination of VHS over similar mediums, especially Betamax, was, I think, a commonly held belief. The author doesn't specifically mention VHS tape, don't get me wrong, but there is an undercurrent that pornography and sex are drivers of innovation, and they seem to argue that if porn has driven technological advancements such as VHS tape, it will carry that momentum further, and society will purchase VR sex suits for the consumption of pornography. And frankly, I have to disagree. I don't think that there's a large societal demand for VR sex suits like there was for porn available via home video. If the only option to consume video pornography was to pack in next to someone else at a public porn theater, and then someone offered you the chance to consume that at home for only $9.95 and a weekend Blockbuster VCR rental, it's a no-brainer. But making the leap from that $9.95 purchase and VCR rental to buying a $10,000 sex suit, I don't think that's going to happen. Sure, there are going to be people who do make that purchase, but it's not going to have the mainstream appeal that the concept of home video did. Ultimately, I think that this is kind of an unserious take. The author predicts that in the future we are all going to have these fiber optic sex lines running into our homes. But where are we going to purchase this equipment? Like, can these fiber optic sex lines be used for anything other than fiber optic sex? No, of course not. They are dedicated fiber optic sex lines. We're going to purchase this equipment from mail order catalogs. But I think I'm getting too into the weeds here. This is a porn magazine. I don't think it's meant to be taken particularly seriously. I had a lot to say about this article, but there are a lot of other articles that I just don't have that much to say about. Color me surprised reviewing a porn mag, but there's some kind of gross stuff in this magazine. There's this article called Come Quick, which is all about the ways to get off in public if you're really, really horny and just a fucking loser. Stuff like sitting on a public bus fare box and having passengers touch you. Gross. Fucking your car's gas tank. Yeah, and that's also gross. And I don't want gasoline anywhere. Yeah. And using half a sandwich to lure a dog back to your office. And I think you can see where that's going. Um, uh, yeah, I think I'm done with this one, and I don't know what this has to do with the premise of future sex at all, frankly. Though there was an article that I was kind of interested in, though not for anything to do with the sexual aspect of it, titled Lucid Sex Dreaming. It's an article outlining the steps in vivid detail about how to induce lucid dreaming, ostensibly for sex, but I don't see why you couldn't follow these steps for other reasons. Lucid dreaming is something that I've always been kind of interested in, if I'm being honest. Mostly because I have these like really vivid, intense dreams and nightmares that are kind of difficult to escape from. I've always felt like if I had the ability to like snap and click myself into this like semi-awake state where I could control my perception, it would be a lot easier to manage those dreams. So I've always wanted to do it, especially since like these very vivid dreams manifest in this way where I'll be waking up and I'll have like a full conversation with my partner, or since I work from home, I'll like sign onto my work computer and talk to my coworkers and start doing work. And then I'll realize that I'm asleep. And so I'll wake up and I'll have a full conversation with my partner, or I'll sign onto my work computer and then I'll realize that I'm asleep. And so I'll wake up, and it's this really disorienting cycle where once I finally do break out after like sometimes 5 or 6 times of doing this, it's disorienting and I have to like lay in bed for like 5 or 10 minutes, like trying to convince myself, like, oh shit, I am really awake this time. So I think that lucid dreaming might be able to help that, but it's hard to say. I did decide to follow the steps in this article for a couple of days. During those days, I would look around myself periodically throughout the day and focus on an object in question. Is this a real object? I would ask myself, am I awake? And I would try to imagine in my waking hours that I was asleep, and in those moments, wrest control of my reality away from my subconscious brain. But I found the days where I really adhered to those steps to be weirdly uncomfortable because of the way you intentionally try to blur the line between dreaming and being awake. I found myself in one of those cycles where I kept waking up and realizing that I was dreaming, where I thought I had woken up and I asked myself, am I dreaming? And the answer I gave myself was no. Because I really have to express to you, my dreams are so vivid. And so I didn't question it. Once I really did wake up, it was twice as disorienting as it had ever been. So I think I'm just going to grit my teeth and live with my nightmares and vivid dreams rather than maybe make them worse by trying to circumvent them. This article was written by Errol Hewitt under a Dr. Stephen LeBerg from the Lucidity Institute in San Francisco. But they love to back up their claims with scientific studies they've performed that, quite frankly, I think are kind of bullshit. They say that you can trust their opinion because they've attached penile strain gauges and blood flow sensors to a man so they could capture the moment he was able to induce a lucid dream and start fucking hotties. The Lucidity Institute apparently still exists, actually. But if I'm being honest, that makes me trust their scientific rigor even less looking at their videos and reading their website. They also sell devices like the Nova Dreamer that I really believe they believe work, but I just can't help but feel like are inadvertent scams. I just want to say that Dr. Stephen LeBerg is a real doctor. He went to Stanford and got a doctorate. Meanwhile, I dropped out of college twice. So I don't want to disparage him or the Lucidity Institute too much. They do have a large following, and I think generally speaking, a lot of their work is pretty innocuous. I don't think it's inherently damaging. But I don't know if I really trust a lot of their findings, or I don't think that it's as revelatory as they seem to think it is. And actually, this magazine as a whole kind of relies on this scientific rigor and takes a scientific stance that I don't think it deserves really throughout the whole magazine. There's an article called Getting Laid While You Get Paid: The Coming Workers' Revolution. See what they did there? That both falls back on scientific authority and I think at the same time perpetuates negative and harmful stereotypes about women and sexuality in the workplace. It describes a woman who's career driven but icy, and they say kind of a bitch, who fucks her intern as a way to blow off steam, and it claims the blessing of a psychoanalyst from the late 1800s named Wilhelm Reich, which, as a red flag, was a peer of Sigmund Freud. Honestly, I don't know much about Wilhelm Reich. I only kind of skimmed his Wikipedia page. But I think in this case, it really doesn't matter who he is or who he isn't, frankly, because he is an authority figure that the article author is name dropping as a way to borrow credibility and sell us, the reader, on the idea that not only do women like want sex in the office, they need sex in the office for the sake of productivity, even if the woman is being just completely cold and outwardly giving signs that she wants nothing to do with you. He is stating that she wants you to fuck her. And that's a really kind of dangerous, kind of sketchy stance to take, isn't it? Um, this article was written by a man, Jim Limpshorken. I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry, Jim Limpshorken. Actually, I'm not. Fuck you, Jim Limpshorken. But from the perspective of a woman, he's trying to sell this idea. Uh, I want you to know that women are absolutely not begging for you to have sex with them in the office. And there is no company in the world that is trying to incentivize or institute this kind of free love office space. In fact, I've never worked in an HR department, but I feel like most HR departments would kind of prefer that sex didn't exist. That's how much they do not want an intersection of like office politics and sexuality. The topic of consent in this magazine is so interesting. I think it probably reflects a lot of the conversations that we're having in the 1990s about consent. There's a comic at the end of this magazine that's actually explicitly about consent, and I don't know how I feel about it. I really can't tell if the author of this comic is being a little bit progressive with it, or if he sucks and I hate him. It's this conversation between a man and a woman where they're hammering out a legal contract of consent. And I think it's so fascinating the different ways that the man and the woman approach this. I feel like the woman's demands are very reasonable. She's like, "Can you prove that you don't have HIV?" And the man's like, "Well, if I knock you up, can I be absolved of parental responsibility?" And her response to that is, "Well, in that case, are you going to get a vasectomy?" I think that the woman's demands are very reasonable. Don't get me wrong, a vasectomy is kind of extreme, but if he wants to be absolved of parental responsibility, then fuck yeah, get a vasectomy, dude. There is one final panel where he says, "If I rape you, will you promise not to say that I raped you?" And, that's kind of where I don't know how to feel about this. This was really the nail in the coffin. This was when I was done with this magazine. Future Sex has some weird, kind of cool, I guess, artsy fartsy sections, but they're really just page filler, like this 2-page postcard spread. I don't know what this is. But even here, there are a lot of gross things. I'm not even going to get into some of the little page fillers that are gross. You can track it down yourself if you want to know what they have to say. Honestly, I'm disappointed, and I think that disappointment is undeserved. I should have known what I was getting into from the get-go because honestly, this magazine is not what I wanted. It's not what I expected, but it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a pornography magazine, and I was coming into this expecting something really goofy and silly and maybe a little bit insightful about the dream of the future, but it's just it's a pornography magazine made for the kind of person in the 1990s who buys pornography magazines. Originally, this video was going to cover the entire spread of this magazine, but after I read this one, I was pretty done. Um, I read a lot of the other articles and the other issues, and I did kind of want to talk about some of what was contained because I did kind of enjoy Pleasure by the Numbers, even if it was like a very silly, unserious article. But that's what I wanted. But I just don't think I have it in me to wade through the rest of this magazine run just to find those silly, goofy articles. Ultimately, this magazine is just exactly the same as that silly, shitty video game, A Night with Troy. From the outset, it promises to be an engaging technological experience, but all you're met with is typing "Lie Troy" and shutting it down. Hey, thanks for watching this silly video, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I've been gone for a while, and I want to come back to YouTube. I don't want to be a YouTuber, I've said that countless times in the past, but I have really missed making videos over the past, oh my god, 2 years that I haven't really put anything real out. So if you're interested in random stuff, I don't think I have really a subject matter that I cover. Tag along. Maybe you'll be interested. All right. Thanks. Bye.